Welcome to Sunday School with Pastor Josh. Well, I'm glad that you stuck with me through the last 4 sessions of a fresh look at the 10 Commandments. We are in the closing 2 sessions of the 10 Commandments, and so we'll be finishing up this series next week, and that will probably be the last video that I post for the Sunday school classes, as it looks like hopefully we'll be starting some Sunday school classes up on site here in the next few weeks. And so hopefully you'll be able to start getting back to a Sunday school class and engaging in that way. And I very much look forward to seeing everybody in Sunday school. I understand that some people are still not comfortable coming back, and that's fine. We totally understand that. I hope that you're able to get the live stream on Sunday mornings and are able to watch on Facebook on Wednesday nights. I'm currently leading a session on Samson, if you're interested in that, on Wednesday nights on our Facebook page. I encourage you to take a look at that. There is a Sunday school survey on our website. I encourage you to go ahead and take that questionnaire, I guess it is, to give us some idea of whether you're ready to come back to Sunday school, what you'd like to see, all of those kind of things. I hope that you'll take time to fill that out. But today we're going to turn our attention to Exodus chapter 20. We're at verse 14. We're on the 7th commandment of the 10 commandments, which is do not commit adultery. Now, as you know, that marriage has its origins back at the very beginning of time. God looked at all he had created, and he looked at man and he said, it's not good for man to be alone. And so he brings Adam into a deep sleep, and he takes a rib from Adam, and he creates woman for him. For out of Adam came Eve. And soon enough, sin entered the world. Now remember, up until the point that Adam and Eve sinned, they were completely naked. They were around each other. They had no shame whatsoever. But the moment that they ate of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, something changed in their relationship. Their relationship changed from one of trusting and lack of shame and just a great desire for one another to one of fear and uncertainty and mistrust. You see, right after they eat the fruit, their initial reaction is, I'm naked, and I can no longer trust this person that's with me to care about me and not make fun of me. I can no longer trust this person, so they cover up what they would consider their shame. See, they don't feel that they're safe with one another any longer. And that is a great downfall of the fall. When God created marriage, he created it to have harmony, to have a cohesiveness between the two that was unbreakable. And yet once sin entered the world, it shattered that harmony, that ability for them to be able to relate to one another. The fall resulted in something much worse than simply what we see today. It resulted in a severance between the relationship of man and God and the relationship between man and fellow mankind. The horrible reality of the fall is that we invent ways to do evil. Marriage is under attack in America. It's been under attack in America since I can remember. And I was born in 86. I don't know how much longer before that it was under attack. But we've redefined marriage. We see that people live together without being married. We see that people have children together without being married. In fact, they have children and then they go and marry somebody else, or they have children with multiple people. There's not a real understanding of marriage. What is marriage? What is marriage all about? Why was it fundamentally important for God to create the institution of marriage? Marriage gives us a foundation for all of society. It is supposed to be a union between a man and a woman that's completely trusting, that they help one another, they're helpmates, they care for one another, they raise children to become good citizens, but also to follow Christ. And all of these things are great, but the way society has redefined marriage is we don't even put God in our marriages anymore. We completely ignore him. And so the fall resulted in sexual deviation. I mean, we have to admit, sex is fun. It's fun. But God created it with a specific purpose. And when sex is used outside of that purpose, it can be deadly. It is deadly, and it has great ramifications for everyone involved. God tells us in his word that there are multiple types of sexual deviation. Prostitution is one of them. Fornication, sex outside of marriage. And then, of course, homosexuality. Now, the Old Testament doesn't have a word for homosexuality. It just says man having relationships with man and woman having relationships with woman, sexual relationships. And God uses the sexual deviations of his people to reveal to the nation of Israel the error of their own ways. If you remember in the book of Hosea, God calls Hosea out and he says, you're going to tell these people this. And for one of the illustrations that he uses, one of the ways that he gets their attention is he has Hosea marry Gomer. And Gomer's a prostitute. And God says, marry this prostitute. And of course, she's not a very faithful person. And she's like, you see, this is what you are like. I am faithful to you, but you are not faithful to me, Israel. And every time we sin as believers, we do the same thing. We prostitute ourselves out to something cheaper. Now, in the sense of homosexuality, that is a direct affront and a direct assault on God's created order. In homosexuality, there is no way for a man to follow through on his command to procreate. We may be able to relate to the other person, but the reality is marriage isn't just about relating to a person. God's fundamental reason for creating the institution of marriage is to have a relationship, to become one with a woman and one man for the reason of procreation, to spread his glory throughout the earth. The reality is that all of the sexual deviations deviate from God's original plan, which is to bless people through sexual relations in the marriage covenant. So all three of these things, prostitution, fornication, and homosexuality, replace God's plan, his original plan, with a gratification of sexual desires. It's a sinful way of gratifying a sexual itch rather than following God's plan to procreate and allow two people, a man and a woman, to become one flesh to the glory of his name and the recognition of his love for us. God gave us sex as a blessing. And out of that blessing comes another blessing, the offspring that we have through that marriage covenant. You see, marriage is a picture of what it's like in the Godhead. Marriage should be two people completely committed to each other. And when we replace it for these things, prostitution, gratifying that sexual itch with someone who's not our wife or our husband, fornication, gratifying our sexual itch before marriage, homosexuality, complete rejection of God's created order to satisfy a sexual itch. Now, many people will say, well, people choose to be gay. I think in some cases that's true. I also believe that in some cases, because of the fall, there is a distortion inside of people's minds that lead them to be attracted to the same sex. It's the same as a person that has depression, a person that has bipolar disorder. It's something that is a part of them that they act upon. Now, the fact that a person has this propensity towards a person of the same sex, or this attraction to a person of the same sex, doesn't necessarily mean that they have to act on that. We're all born sinners. We're all born with a propensity towards sin, and God can forgive us of those things, and we all struggle with the same sins. Many of them we were born with. And God can redeem even a homosexual who realizes that it's wrong to even have these thoughts, but who pursues righteousness and who pursues a life of celibacy. Homosexuality is wrong, but so is adultery. And adultery is always a choice. It's always a choice that someone makes. In the Bible, God uses the term of adultery both literally and figuratively. He brings his messages through, like the prophet Jeremiah, that the people with whom he's made a covenant, who he's been faithful to, are cheating on him, are committing adultery by worshiping other gods. But today we're going to talk about the fact that there is a literal adultery that God commands us not to be a part of. This verse that says, do not commit adultery, can be summed up in two words. No adultery. The same as last week when we talked about do not murder, do not kill. It's no murder. There is a very cut and dry definition that God says. You will not commit adultery. There is no black and white. There is no, there is black and white. There is no gray area. God says no adultery, and he doesn't elaborate on that because he doesn't have to. Because when God says no, he means no. Because he realizes the great impact that can have, not just on a person's marriage, but on their family, and in David's case, as we saw a few weeks ago, on an entire nation. Now, adultery doesn't have to be carried out physically in order for it to be adultery. Jesus says, if you look after a woman lustfully, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. It means that your heart has already strayed from your marriage vows. And you are already outside of that covenant that you made with that man or with that woman. And our hearts are deceitful beyond all things. So while we might not think much of carrying out our secret sins, whether it's in the bedroom through masturbation, or it's inside of our secret thoughts, or if it's looking at pornography, the reality is that people may not know about that, but it's breaking our fellowship with God. And it's also breaking the trust of those that we love. And the ramifications of that can and will be great. See, God doesn't necessarily say that we will be punished for our sins on this side of eternity, that the consequences of our sins will catch up with us this side of eternity. But each one of us will stand before him and give an account for the life we lived while knowing Christ. And the results of that will be rewards given, or rewards that could have been given that are now lost. So eventually, even our secret sins will catch up to us. Adultery includes the wandering eye of those who also engage in pornography. It's stunning to me how many people actually do struggle with pornography. The porn industry brings in billions of dollars a year. I read somewhere that even if you took all of like the NHL, the NFL, the MLB, the Major League Soccer, and combined all of the money that they make, the porn industry would still outdo them every single year. Over 10% of our population says that they regularly visit pornographic sites. 64% of Christians, or at least those who claim to be Christians, religious people, watch pornography at least once a month. And that's men, 64%. 15% of women say that they watch pornography at least once a month. See, porn is a complete affront to God. to everything that He has made us for. Sexual pleasure was not made for self-gratification. It was made to allow two people to become one flesh, to become intimate with one another. And when we bow down to the altar of sexual pornography viewing, of pornographic viewing, we are bowing down to the women and the men that we view. That we are bowing down to the God of sexual pleasure instead of engaging with the God who created us and promises us a greater pleasure than the temporary ecstasy of sexual release. The industry itself, as a Christian, should be horrific to us. When we look at the fact that the pornography industry is shameful, sinful, wicked, and morally corrupt, and that it breaks the trust of so many families, so many marriages are ruined by pornography because pornography feeds into this sense that sex is some kind of thing that exists to bring me happiness instead of some sort of spiritual experience and physical experience that brings me closer to my spouse. We take one more step closer to not just committing adultery in our hearts, but committing adultery in reality. 300% increase. There's a 300% increase in the likelihood that a person who is viewing pornography will eventually commit adultery or infidelity. This industry is horrific. Women are literally drugged to get them through these videos. They're abused. They're taken at young ages and their minds are manipulated and they're brainwashed into thinking that they are nothing unless they are beautiful on camera and being used by men to bring pleasure to other people. Listen to me. Pornography is adultery. If you're engaged in pornography, it should be one of the biggest red flags that there is something wrong in your marriage and or there is something wrong with your relationship with Christ. You are not being satisfied somewhere. And the reality is that many times it's not the sexual gratification that you're after, it's an intimate relationship with another human being, which you cannot have through a computer or a cell phone. You may even be lacking in your relationship with Christ. It's not a harmless sin. It hurts you. It breaks the trust of you and your spouse. And for goodness sake, you're buying into an industry that abuses human beings in the hopes that it'll bring somebody some sort of temporary pleasure. Is that really how you want your life to be defined? That you invested your money and your time into an industry that is completely against anything that God has commanded? Are you really going to invest your time and your money into an industry that's destroying your marriage? What if you took that time that you spend watching pornography and committing adultery with your wife or your husband and invest in that? That is glorifying to God, and God will help you get through that. He will help you. He will convict you of that sin. And He will guide you through the process of healing and redemption. You have got to stop committing adultery. If this is you, come talk to one of the pastors. Find somebody who can hold you accountable. Your marriage and your family depend on it. Adultery breaks the trust and the bonds that God means for us to have with our spouse. You cannot bond with a computer screen. The greatest marriage relationship that we can have with our spouse is one that is built on the foundation of God and one that is constantly protected from the thoughts, sexual urges, and temptations that drive us into sin. A marriage is built around God for a reason, around mutual love and respect for one another. And when it's built on hurt and mistrust, that marriage is headed for a very difficult and tragic time. The sin of adultery is against man and against God himself. So you might wonder, how do I overcome this very difficult urge of sexual relationships with someone who is not my spouse? How can I avoid that? And turn with me to Proverbs chapter 5 and listen to what the writer of this proverb has to say. My son, be attentive to my wisdom, incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion and your lips may guard knowledge. For lips of a forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is bitter as woodworm, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down the depths. Her steps follow to the path of Sheol. She does not ponder the path of life. Her ways wander. She does not know it. And now, O son, listen to me, and do not depart from the words of my mouth. Keep away from her, and do not go near the door of her house, lest you give her honor to others and your years to the merciless. Lest strangers take their fill of your strength and your labor and go to your house and go to the house of a foreigner. And at the end of your life, you groan and your flesh and body are consumed. And you say, how I hated discipline and my heart despised reproof. I did not listen to the voice of my teachers or incline my ear to their instructors. I am on the brink of utter ruin. In the assembled congregation, drink from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. Should your spring be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be for yourself alone and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely, dear, and graceful doe. Let her breasts fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love. Why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman, and embrace the bosom of an adulteress? For a man's ways are before God's eyes, and he ponders his path. The iniquities and of the wickedness ensnare him, and he is held fast in the cords of his sin. He dies for lack of discipline. Because of his great folly, he is led astray. The Proverbs writer here is writing not just to his son, but to all of us who are wise. The beginning of all wisdom is the fear of God. The fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom. And he tells us right here, the lips of a forbidden woman drip honey. Listen, some of you may be struggling with someone who's not your spouse. And you look at that and you think, boy, I have to have that. She's a forbidden woman. And boy, I would love to be with her. Her speech is smoother than oil. She may say all of the right things. But like sin, the end is destruction. Her feet go down to the path of death. Her end is bitter as wormwood. And she follows the path to Sheol. Finding a woman who stands by you and who loves you, and who speaks the words of life into you, and who lifts you up as a woman worth respecting and loving. But this particular woman, the adulterous woman, the forbidden woman, she does not ponder the path of life. Her ways wander, and she does not know it. Eventually, you're consumed, and you think, how I hated the instruction of my teachers. I'm on the brink of ruin in the assembled congregation. This is a warning to us that the end of adultery is always destruction. You ruin yourself, your character, your family, your spouse, your friends. And what we're seeing today, as marriage has been redefined and adultery doesn't seem to be a big deal, and fornication is not a big deal, and homosexuality doesn't seem to be a big deal, and prostitution is on the brink of even becoming legalized. And we also have people talking about the legalization of pedophilia. We see that none of these things lead to life. They ultimately lead to destruction. Sin always leads to destruction. Depart from from the forbidden woman. Drink from your own cistern. You may have to force yourself to love your wife or your husband. You may look at them and you may say, their morning breath is kicking every day. I'm tired of the way that they walk. I'm tired of the way that they do dishes. I'm just sick of being with them. But we have to take our minds, like the Apostle Paul tells us, and renew them each and every day, and focus on bringing our attention to our spouses and loving who they are. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely deer and a graceful doe. Let her breast fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love. Listen, that adulterous woman or that adulterous man or that person that you're considering having a sexual relationship with outside the bounds of marriage does not love you as your spouse loves you. They want to bring you temporary satisfaction, but your spouse loves you. And if you love your spouse, you focus on making sure that each and every day you love them. Proverbs 6:20 reads this way: My son, keep your father's commandment, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Bind them to your heart, tie them around your neck. When you walk, they will lead you. When you lie down, they will watch over you. And when you wake, they will talk with you. For the commandment is a lamp and the teaching of a light. And the reproofs and discipline are the way of life, to preserve you from the evil woman, from smooth-talking adulteresses. Do not desire her beauty in your heart, and do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. For the price of a prostitute is only a loaf of bread, but a married woman hunts down a precious life. Can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk on hot coals and not his feet be scorched? So is he who has his neighbor's wife. None who touches her will go unpunished. People do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy his appetite when he's hungry, but if he's caught, he will pay sevenfold, and he will give all his goods of his house. He who commits adultery lacks sense. He who does it destroys himself. He will get wounds and dishonor, and his disgrace will not be wiped away. For jealousy makes a man furious, and he cannot spare when he takes revenge. He will accept no compensation. He will refuse, though you multiply gifts. It is wise to stay away from the woman who is a smooth-talking adulteress. You see, God does not want to control us with his law. God wants to protect us with his law. And so when the writer of Proverbs is saying, keep this command, he's not saying, keep it if you want to, keep it because I told you to. He's saying, keep it because I love you. And that's the same way that God approaches this. Do not desire her beauty in your heart. You notice that the first place in this verse that they go, that the Proverbs writer goes, is to the heart. Do not desire her in your heart. Why? Because our hearts are where the seeds of sin begin to grow. Our thought life is where the seeds of sin begin to grow. And if we entertain those thoughts and we continue living in that thought life, eventually our hearts will give way to another step towards sin. You may be thinking, there's a beautiful person that I would love to get with. And you may be thinking about them and obsessing over them, or you may be trying even to figure out ways that you can almost get to the line of adultery, but not quite cross it. Jesus says once you've already said that in your heart, you've already crossed the line of adultery, but our thought lives don't always carry the same weight of consequences that action causes. And so we have to protect our own hearts, and do not do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. For the price of a prostitute is a loaf of bread, but a married woman hunts down a precious life. You see, as he goes on, he says, can a man carry fire next to his chest and not be burnt? There are ramifications for adultery that we have to be aware of. And also, those ramifications will come, especially if that person touches their neighbor's wife or the wife of another man. He will destroy them. It says, he who commits adultery lacks sense, and he destroys himself. Because adultery brings nothing but ruin and shame and wounds and dishonor and disgrace, and it won't be wiped away. And then they face the jealousy and the wrath of the one whom that other person is married to. They will not escape. If you're committing adultery, even if it's in your heart, you lack sense. And all of us commit adultery in some form or another, lusting after another person. We think, man, it's not really a big deal. But in reality, we lack sense. Stop. Push it away. Pursue righteousness. Be redeemed by the blood of Christ and renewed by renewing your mind in the Spirit each and every day. Some of us don't realize what we have. You see, we believe that there's always something better. Maybe our spouse is not who we thought they would be. Maybe they're not as attractive as we thought they would be. Or maybe they're not as friendly as we thought they would be. Or maybe they don't do the things we think they should do. And we think, maybe I should just find somebody else who can satisfy my needs. We have to recognize that whether our spouse is everything we thought they would be or not, they've been given to us by God for us to love and to cherish and to pour into and to fill with the love of Christ. Listen to Proverbs 31:10, an excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works willingly with her hands. She is like the ships of a merchant. She brings food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants the vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and she makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out. She puts her hands to the distaff and her hands to the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor and she reaches out her hands to the needy. And she's not afraid of the snow for her household. She is not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household are clothed in scarlet. She makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates. And when he sits among the elders of the land, she makes linen garments and sells them, and she delivers sashes to merchants. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and teachings of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household, and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain. But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. Ladies, that's something to strive for. Something to live for. Something to desire honor for. Men, cherish your wives. She may not live up to who this wife is, but our job is to encourage her, to strengthen her, and to help her get to this point where people say, many women have been excellent, but you surpass them all. Marriage is about partnership and relationship and commitment and love, even when it's hard. Run from the adulterous woman, the adulterous man. Strive to live more like Christ and base your foundation of your marriage on God and watch him work wonders. You may be struggling in your heart with attraction or with adultery or with pornography. Seek God. Center your life around pursuing righteousness and loving your spouse no matter what. And I guarantee you, you will see the blessings of God flow from his throne into your life.